So we all know that the Imperialdramon is one of the most popular decks of the current format. I know some of you guys have been playing this deck over and over again, and you might get a little bit bored and tired of it by now. However, if aggressive style decks is sort of what you'd like to go for, but you want a little bit of a change and not too much at the same time, then let me introduce you to Armor Rush. Hello Digimon players and fans, welcome back to another Digimon deck profile and in-depth building guide video. I know many of you guys are Mastemon fans, so it definitely makes sense to first cover this deck as well. Like I mentioned, if aggro is your style, then I definitely recommend this deck for you guys to play as well, other than just Imperial. The deck and archetype is actually fairly similar to Imperial, with having Veemon as your main rookie. Despite all the other similarities with Imperial, where the game plan is to swing as much as you can, to deal damage and then win games, there's still quite a number of differences when playing the actual deck. And furthermore, if you guys tried both decks already, you would probably know how it feels. Armor Rush mainly focuses on the Armor Purge mechanic, which provides an extra layer of protection to your Digimon from deletion, whether by battle or effects. It also has potential to become even more explosive than Imperialdramon, and that is only when you can gather all the key pieces together at the right time. However, the consistency is not as smooth, because the deck heavily does lack draw power, and this would result in the deck being a little bit more, some of you guys would say, high roll. But on the other hand, it could have quite a few fun aspects to it. Also, this deck will become even stronger in BT9 with the introduction of Mastemon X-Antibody, and I know many of you guys are just as excited because, like I mentioned, we're Mastemon fans, right? Of course, we'll be making a video for the updated version during the BT9 format as well, and you know what you gotta do if you want to watch that video? Well, if you haven't guessed it yet, that is to subscribe and turn on that notification bell right now to stay tuned for it. Also, give this video a like as it really helps. Okay, now, let's begin with the deck profile first. Just like always, let's begin with Digi cards. We got 4 copies of Ophanimon and the 1 copy of Xiaomon from EX2. This deck really lacks draw power and you really need it. That's why Ophanimon is extremely crucial, being as your main egg, because it allows you to draw when attacking if your opponent has a Digimon without sources. This is the most reliable blue egg out there that gives you the draw you need. And then as for Xiaomon, on the other hand, while you have a Digimon that is level 4, it gets extra 1000 DP, and this is also all turns, which is really nice because we heavily focus on level 4s in this deck. And yeah, that's basically why I play this egg lineup right here. Now let's get into our rookies, which are basically all just Veemons, but different kinds. The first one let's showcase is the Jamming Veemon from BT3. This is the best Veemon out there. It has jamming. It is an extremely good card in the early stages of the game to make chip damage. It's a very strong powerhouse, and your opponent will often enough have to address this card during the early stages, simply because it can do even more damage if they don't get rid of it. So that's it for the Veemon right here. Next up, let's talk about some searching Veemons. We first have the 3 copies of the Star Deck 9 Veemon, and then we also have 3 copies of the BT8 Veemon. Both these Veemon on play allows you to search. The Star Deck 9 Veemon reveals the top 3, adding a free trait, which is basically anything in your deck into your hand. And then the BT8 Veemon is reveal 4, and you get to grab 1 2-colored blue card among them and add it to your hand, and then you put the rest to the bottom. Now this Veemon being able to add a 2-color blue card doesn't necessarily mean that it can be a Digimon. You can also grab a double color tamer that has blue, or even a double color option that has blue in it as well. And we do play quite a fair number of those cards, meaning that this Veemon is actually very useful in this particular deck. For the other Veemon, we have 3 copies of the O-Force Digimon Star Deck 7 Veemon right here. We mainly really just play this card for its inheritable to give us the early game draws. If we have 7 or less cards, we get to draw 1, which is very, very handy, really good. We don't play O-Force Digimon, so we don't get to warp with its main effect at all, but like I mentioned, its inheritable is what we need it for. Now to round off for the VMons, we have the 2 copies of the EX1 VMon. This one has a inheritable of once per turn your turn. When you unsuspend this Digimon, you get to gain a memory. We do a little bit of unsuspending here and there, and this inheritable does come in handy to give us extra memory to make more plays. So that'll be it for our rookies, and now let's talk about our level 4s, which is mainly our armor Digimon. First, we got the 4 copies of Flamedramon right here. The one on the left is the Alt-Art. So this Digimon digivolves on top of a red level 3 for a 3 cost. However, we do have a new mechanic allowing us to digivolve for 2 from any VMon, which is really crucial. Next, it has Armor Purge, and Armor Purge is a newly introduced mechanic specifically for armored Digimon. And what it does, it allows you to prevent any deletions by battle or effects simply by trashing the top card, and then it will de-digivolve sort of back to the level 3. And that is really nice because it gives your Digimon a bit more of floating capabilities, and that's really what Armor Purge is all about. Lastly, Flamedramon's most well-known effect is that when attacking, it gets extra 3000 DP for the turn, meaning that it is your powerhouse attacker of the deck. Next, we have 4 copies of Lydramon right here. Lydramon digivolves on top of a green for 3 cost. However, once again, just like Flamedramon, you can digivolve on top of a VMon for a cost of 2 instead. It has Armor Purge, exactly like what I explained earlier as well. And then it's known for, when digivolving, suspending one of your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, where Lydramon is more of your control style armor Digimon right here, so it can swing over some of your opponent's level 4s or stop some blockers occasionally. Now let's move on to our so-called boss Digimon of the deck. We have the 4 copies of Mastemon. Once again, the one on the left is the Alt-Art. Love the gold and shiny shimmering, which is absolutely amazing. This one is actually a little bit different because it can digivolve on top of a yellow or blue Digimon that is level 3 for the cost of 4, and now that's pretty expensive. However, like I mentioned, you read the first text, you can digivolve for 3 on top of VMon, and all our rookies once again are VMon, so we'll always be digivolving it for 3, and he does a whole lot of things. First of all, he's a blocker, which is really good because he is your defender of the deck. Once again, Armor Purge does exactly the same thing like I described earlier, and then when digivolving, you can unsuspend this Digimon. Also, it gets extra 2000 DP until the end of your opponent's next turn for each card that has armor form in its traits in your trash. Meaning that you can do a whole lot of really cool things with this card right here, because he can become a really strong beefy boy in the mid game and late game, and potentially even make more multiple checks with its own unsuspending effect, which is why Mastemon is incredibly strong. To round up for the level 4s, we got the 2 copies of Lobomon, just so we could go into our hybrid for game right here, and it does happen, which really helps. That's it for all of our level 4 Digimon. Now let's talk about level 5s. I only played 2 level 5s, which are the 2 copies of Imperialdramon right here. I really like having Imperialdramon in the deck because it can do multiple swings and it does combo very nicely. You can DNA Digivolve, however, it is not as consistent at doing its DNA Digivolving compared to the Imperial deck. So sometimes you may have to Digivolve this card in your raising and then bring it out the next turn to make multiple checks with it and hope for it that it doesn't get deleted. And yeah, more swings with Imperialdramon, the better. That's it for all of our Digimon. Now we can talk about our Tamers. Tamer, we of course have the 3 copies of Davis. Not only he is your memory tamer, but also your searcher on play, allowing you to grab a blue and green Digimon, which is very handy. There are times that you're able to hit your Lydramon, which is your green Digimon, and along with another blue Digimon from the deck, which is really, really nice. So yeah, 3 Davises. Next up, we got another 3 copies of Davis and Ken. This one is at the start of your main phase. If you have a blue, you gain a memory. If you have a green, you gain another memory, which is always very nice. Combos very nicely, especially when you have Lydramon. Now, we don't really rely on that memory gain too much because we actually play this card more so for its second effect. Your turn, when one of your Digimon digivolves into a Digimon with 2 or more colors, you can suspend this Tamer to unsuspend that Digimon. This is where your Armor Purge and unsuspending shenanigans start to come into play and really give you value to make multiple swings during the turn, which is really what this Tamer is all about. And later, once again, I'll showcase you guys a quick combo and how this kind of works all together. That's it for all of our Tamers. Now let's talk about options, which we do play quite a fair amount of. First and foremost, let's talk about the blue staple options. 4 Hammer Sparks and 1 Ice Wall, gaining memory to make more plays. It is also your security defensive mechanism to potentially limit your opponent's plays during their turn. And yeah, since they're blue staple cards, there's really not too much to talk about how good they really are. Next up, let's showcase our armor related options. First and foremost, we have 3 Fire Rockets. While you have a Digimon with armor 4 in its traits, you can use this option without meeting its color requirements, which is really just dedicated for this deck. It's a very simple main. One of your Digimon with 2 or more colors gains security +1 for the turn, and you always want to be seeing this card in your hand because it gives you the aggression of what this deck really does, to swing in for multiple checks as early as you can, and the more you can do it, the more pressure you can apply and start to go for game later on. However, on the other hand, its security effect is really not that good because when it comes out from security, you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with blocker, and during this format, there's really not a whole lot of blockers coming around, and it's just not as valuable because you just really want to have this card in your hand so you can play it and use its effect for security +1. Next, I have 2 armor textures right here. This card is really interesting and really good. Similar to the Fire Rocket, as long as you have a armor form of Digimon and its traits on play, you can use this option without meeting color requirements. Main, you trash the top card of your Digimon with armor form, and then you can digivolve it into another armor form from your hand. It can be the same Digimon as well by paying the cost, and if you do, you do unsuspend that Digimon. Very similar concept to the Davis and Ken Tamer, which I explained earlier. However, this is more useful in a case where your armor Digimon doesn't get deleted from security, so you can quickly change it up and unsuspend and then attack again, which is really nice. And it also has a very good security effect, which I think it's better than Fire Rocket, because in security you can play a level 3 Digimon card with free in its traits from your trash without paying memory costs, and usually you will be playing your Vmons back. And keep in mind, you can also use your on play effects along with the search your Vmons when you need to. So that's armor texture. Lastly, to round up for our final armor related option, we have a plasma shot right here. Just like all other armor form related options, if you have an armor form in play, you can ignore its color requirements. Main, you choose one of your opponent's Digimon and it gets -4000 DP for the turn. And then all of your opponent's Digimon gets -1000 DP for each card with armor in its traits in your trash, including that initial Digimon that you chose. And this card is just really good in the late game to help you clear wide boards in one shot just for the 4 cost of memory is really good, and also potentially getting rid of a bigger Digimon on the board. And I like it as a one-off because it's also really good against D-Reaper. Last but not least, to round up for all of our options, we have the 2 copies of Megadeth right here. Still one of the best options for removal. As long as you're playing some kind of free or Imperialdramon sort of Vmon related, you definitely want to be playing this option because you get to suspend one of your opponent's Digimon, then choose one of your opponent's suspended Digimon and return back to their hand. And we do play quite a handful of blue and green cards to help us and allow us to use this card quite consistently, but of course we always would like to have it come out security to give us the best value when we have this option. So that is it for all the cards in our main decks. Now let's go through some other key cards that I sort of considered, or you guys might consider playing in this deck as well. The first card let's talk about is the All-Force Beelzemon right here. Honestly, as cool as this card really is, and as much as I love the artwork, I just don't think this card is good enough, but I have seen people play it and it has worked for them because you can warp into it and you can make multiple checks sometimes, which is really good, and bounce a level 4 at the same time. Now, however, I don't really play too much of a level 5 lineup, so I don't see a very consistent way for myself to get into this card, and your level 4s are really good at what they do already. You really don't need a top end in this deck, and that's how I like to go about it, so that's why I don't play it though. Next up, we have Chimeramon, which is your other DNA target other than Beelzemon. I have been debating playing this card over that as well because Chimeramon in this deck can potentially actually stack over 4 colors in its sources, which is really nice, so that you can minus a lot of DP to your opponent's Digimon, pop wide boards, also really good especially against D-Reaper, and Chimeramon can potentially get into the 12k zone, which makes it an incredibly strong Digimon. So I think Chimeramon is definitely a very nice consideration. Sometimes when you do play Chimeramon, you can actually consider topping it along with a dragon mode. And dragon mode comes in really great value because when you do go on top of it, you can usually spit out a Lydramon and another blue level 4 or lower. Optimally will be your Mastemon, and then you will have a blocker on the board as well, which is really nice. And yeah, something to consider of when you do want to play Chimeramon. However, like I mentioned earlier, I don't like level 6s in this deck. I don't think it's necessary or needed, which is why I don't play them at all. Now, the other really interesting package you guys could also include is a Shakomon and Kilomon package. Now, I would play somewhere between 3 and 4 copies of each of this card to be added into the deck, but by doing so, you will obscure your ratios a lot, and you have to take out quite a bit of cards to make this work. However, Shakomon is really nice because it gives you a little bit of defensive capabilities with the recovery and bouncing effect, and then you really need Ankylomon together because you do have a lot of blue level 4s so that you can DNA into it reliably and consistently enough. Ankylomon also gives you inheritable of DP reduction, which is always nice, and Shakomon as well. So you may consider playing level 6s in the deck if you ever want to do the Shakomon. However, it's reliable and you don't really necessarily need to. So that's it for Shakomon and Ankylomon. So now that we've done talking about all the other considerable optional cards that you can add in the deck, let's showcase you guys a couple of combos that how this deck runs and how you want to play it. So first and foremost, there's actually a lot of different combos that you can be playing, and they're very simple though, very simple linear combos. But of course, in the early stages of the game, you hatch your egg and you want to go into your jamming Vmon most preferably, and basically just move it up as soon as you can and just start swinging with it as many times as you can to do some chip damage. So let's just say you don't see your jamming Vmon and you have a different Vmon, and you will try to grow your armor inside your raising, preferably your Flamedramon because it is your powerhouse, and then sort of pass to your opponent. And once your opponent puts you to your 1 memory, you can move up your Flamedramon and just start going aggressive. And ideally, this is when you want to have your Fire Rocket, so then you can swing for 2 checks with Flamedramon, and it has 8000 DP, and you get to draw 1 card if you have 7 fewer. And if your opponent also has a Digimon with no sources on board, you get to draw an extra with Ophanimon, which is great. And right here, you're just really hoping that Flamedramon survives. Usually it does because of its 8k, which is really good, but if it ever doesn't, you can always just easily Armor Purge right here and continue your turn and play something else. Now, at this moment in time, this is when I really want to explain how, I guess, armor texture with extra memory and having Davis and Ken is really crucial. If you have Davis and Ken, so when you do have the extra memory to make more plays, you can then Digivolve your Vmon into another armor, such as Lydramon instead, suspend your Davis and Ken to unsuspend the Lydramon, pay the memory, and then you can now suspend one of your opponent's Digimon with Lydramon's effect, and you have options. You can either swing as security aggressively once again, or you can swing over the Digimon for more control. Really up to you. Other than that, there's another very quick key cool combo that you can have right here. If you swing in with your jamming Vmon and it survives the checks, and you have 2 memory, you can pass your opponent to 1 by Digivolving it into a Mastemon, and then it will unsuspend and become a blocker during your opponent's turn. But let's just say for whatever reason you have extra memory and you had 3 instead, so you're retaining your turn, you can now swing again with Mastemon, which is also really good. Now let's go into some even cooler combos as well. Once again, you have Flamedramon, you move it up, you play your Fire Rocket for 1, giving it extra security. This time you have the actual jamming Vmon underneath. Once again, you swing over it for 2 checks. Now, if Flamedramon does get deleted, you would obviously purge, and your jamming Vmon will continue the checks, and it will have the jamming, so then it increases its survivability, which is really great. Next up, if you have a second Flamedramon, this is really when it gets nutty. You do need 3 memory for this particular combo, so having the Davis setup is always ideal. Or when you do have the 3 memory, you pay the 2 memory to Digivolve into another Flamedramon right here, and then you will suspend your Davis and Ken to allow it to unsuspend it. Now keep in mind, it will retain the security +1 that you have with the Fire Rocket from earlier. Not only that, if you swing in once again, the Flamedramon is going to get another 3000 DP on top of the 3000 DP you gained earlier, making it 11k here, which is really strong and really good. So 2 more checks, that's 4 checks in 1 simple turn, and that's really an optimal combo you want to see. And you put your opponent down to 1 security, and then it's just a breeze to take them down from there on. Now, alternatively, if you don't have Davis and Ken, and your Flamedramon survives the checks, this is when armor texture comes in. Now, you'll probably be be back at 2 memory because you play the Fire Rocket, and you can use Armor Texture instead. You would trash the Flamedramon, and then now you go into another Flamedramon or any other armor as long as you can pay the cost and retain your turn, and then swing again because Armor Texture allows you to unsuspend, which is why it's really, really good. Now to round off for all of the combos, here's the most spiciest one of all, and this one does require a little bit more setup, and it does require you to have a bit more sort of analysis in identifying what the case is during the board to see if you can actually pull it off. So it doesn't happen as often, but it does happen every now and then, so you do have to pay attention. But anyways, your opponent might put you to 3 memory at the beginning with your Davis, and then you move up your Lydramon, so you gain 2 with the Davis and Ken. Next up, you pay the 1 to do the Fire Rocket combo, so your Lydramon can swing in for 2 checks, and hopefully the 2 checks go through. Whether Armor Purge or not, if it does get deleted, that's totally fine. You Armor Purge it right here, then otherwise, you can next pay another 2 memory to go into a Flamedramon, suspending the Davis and Ken to unsuspend the Flamedramon, and you can make 2 checks again. And this is where Armor Texture comes in real handy. So then you will play Armor Texture, so you will trash this top one right here, and then you play, like, say, another Flamedramon, and then Armor Texture will allow it to unsuspend, and then you can make another check. So that is like 6 checks in total. If not, potentially you could be swinging for game already by then if you did some early chip damage, and that's kind of how you want to win the game with armor. That will conclude for my very own deck building strategy and in-depth guide for the Armor Rush deck. If you guys enjoyed the video and found it helpful, please give it a like. If you have any suggestions, recommendations, or questions, be sure to share it with everyone in the comments down below. Once again, BT9 is coming up real soon, and I can't wait to get our Mastemon X-Antibody and rebuild this deck and update it for that format. So once again, if you guys haven't done so yet and just as excited, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on that notification bell to stay tuned as soon as that video drops. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you in the next video. And this is Avault, signing out.